now that we actually have some exclusive video on Michael Jackson's last rehearsal.
June 24th, 2009. The final rehearsal for the This Is It tour wrapped up late at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Michael Jackson left the building, climbed into a car, and was driven back to the rented mansion on North Carrollwood Drive that had become his home during the final weeks of his life. The streets outside were quiet. The cameras that usually followed him everywhere had gone home for the night. Nobody watching him walk to that car had any idea they were watching him leave a public stage for the very last time. He did not know it was the last rehearsal he would ever attend. Nobody around him knew that either. The production team was already planning for the next day. The choreographers were already thinking about adjustments for the following rehearsal session. Everyone around Michael Jackson that night was operating under the completely reasonable assumption that there would be a tomorrow, and a tomorrow after that, all the way through 50 sold-out shows in London. But in the hours that followed that night, inside the walls of that rented house, Michael Jackson said something. A simple, quiet request, spoken to one person, that would later be repeated word for word in a courtroom, examined carefully by medical experts, and picked apart by millions of people around the world to understand exactly what those final hours of his life actually contained. It was not a dramatic statement. It was not some cryptic warning shouted out to the world, the kind that conspiracy theories are usually built around. It was just 5 words spoken softly in a dark and quiet bedroom, only hours before everything changed forever. And when you actually understand the full context behind those words, who he was speaking to, what state his body and mind were truly in during those final weeks, and what had been happening behind the scenes for months leading up to that night, the whole story finally starts to make a different kind of sense. This is the story of that final message. Not a hidden code, not a secret prophecy, just the truth, finally understood, about what Michael Jackson actually needed in the last hours of his life and why he never got it. To tell this story properly, you have to go back further than just that single night. You have to look at the entire arc of pressure that had been quietly building around him for months, the financial strain, the physical toll of rehearsals, the slow collapse of his ability to sleep naturally, all of it converging on one ordinary-seeming night that turned out to be anything but ordinary. Only then does that final message actually make sense. To understand the message Michael Jackson left that night, you first have to understand the exhaustion that had been quietly building inside him for weeks, even months, before it ever reached that final bedroom conversation. By June 2009, he was 50 years old and preparing for 50 concerts at London's O2 Arena, a residency that had originally been scheduled to run from July 2009 all the way through March 2010. The physical demands of preparing for a schedule like that were enormous, even for a performer with his level of experience. Rehearsals ran long, choreography had to be relearned and refined. Vocal stamina had to be rebuilt after years away from a major touring schedule. According to multiple accounts from people who were close to him during that specific period, Michael Jackson had reportedly collapsed during rehearsals on more than one occasion in the weeks leading directly up to his death, only to return to rehearsal the very next day, regardless of how he had felt the day before. People who knew him well at the time described this pattern as simply who he was. He pushed through difficulty the same way he always had throughout his entire career, treating exhaustion as something to work around rather than something to stop and address. One person close to him later wrote that when he learned Michael had collapsed on stage, he was told that this was simply Michael being Michael, pushing forward no matter what his body was telling him. Behind that quiet determination to keep going was something the adoring public watching clips of his rehearsals online did not fully see or understand at the time. According to people who later spoke about this period, Michael Jackson was under serious financial pressure during these final months, reportedly facing the very real possibility of losing Neverland Ranch entirely if the tour did not succeed in restoring his finances. The pressure was not abstract or distant. It was immediate, personal, and tied directly to the home that had meant so much to him for so many years. Alongside that financial pressure was something even more physically dangerous. A man who had not been sleeping properly for a very long time, whose insomnia had become so severe and so resistant to treatment that conventional sleep medication had simply stopped working for him entirely. On the night of June 24th, after that final rehearsal ended, Michael Jackson went home to that rented Los Angeles mansion exhausted in a way that went far beyond the tiredness of simply having a long workday. According to later testimony, he spent that entire night lying awake in bed, tossing and turning for hours, completely unable to fall asleep no matter what he tried on his own. It is worth remembering that insomnia of this severity is not simply an inconvenience. For someone preparing to perform physically demanding choreography night after night in front of sold-out arenas, the inability to sleep becomes a direct threat to the entire project. Every hour spent awake and staring at the ceiling was an hour his body was not recovering from the previous day's rehearsal, and an hour closer to the next day's demands arriving regardless of how rested he actually was. By the time June 25th's early morning hours arrived, that cumulative exhaustion had reached a breaking point that very few people outside that house fully understood in the moment. As the early morning hours of June 25th wore on and sleep still refused to come, Michael Jackson turned, as he had for weeks before this exact night, to his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, who was staying at the house specifically and exclusively to help him manage his ongoing, worsening struggle with sleep. According to Murray's own account, later given under oath during his criminal manslaughter trial, Michael Jackson made a very specific and very particular request that morning. He asked for something that he had taken to calling, in his own private language, milk. It was not, of course, actual dairy milk. It was Michael Jackson's own personal nickname, something he had clearly used many times before in private conversation, for Propofol, the powerful surgical anesthetic that had become, over the previous 2 months, his only reliable and consistent way of falling asleep at all. Propofol carries an actual clinical nickname within medical circles, sometimes referred to informally as milk of amnesia, specifically because of its distinctive milky white appearance when it is prepared and loaded into a syringe for use. Michael Jackson had apparently picked up on that existing medical nickname at some point and quietly made it his own private code word, a softer, gentler, almost childlike way of asking for something that was, in clinical and medical reality, an extremely serious surgical-grade drug that was never, under any approved medical guideline, meant to be used as a casual nightly sleep aid administered repeatedly inside a private home. According to Murray's sworn testimony, Michael Jackson said the following words that morning: please, give me some milk so that I can sleep, because I know that this is all that really works for me. Read that sentence again slowly. It was a simple, exhausted, almost desperate plea from a 50-year-old man who had clearly already tried everything else available to him, and who genuinely believed, based on 2 straight months of repeated experience, that he had nothing else left that actually worked anymore. This was not the voice of a global superstar making demands from a position of power. This was the voice of an exhausted human being, stripped of all the spectacle and all the choreography and all the carefully managed public image, simply asking, almost begging, for the one thing his body desperately needed in that exact moment. It is worth noting how ordinary that nickname actually was in its origin. People struggling with serious medical conditions often develop small, private words for the things keeping them alive or keeping them functioning, partly to make an uncomfortable reality feel slightly less frightening to talk about out loud. Calling Propofol milk did not make it safer. It simply made it easier for him to ask for, night after night, in the same soft, familiar way a tired child might once have asked a parent for something warm before bed. Murray's testimony described what happened next in careful, specific detail during the trial. He explained that he initially resisted giving Michael Jackson what he was asking for, fully aware of just how much medication Michael Jackson had already taken earlier that same night, during his own desperate, independent attempt to fall asleep without any outside help at all. But eventually, according to his own sworn account, he gave in to the repeated request, because Michael Jackson had already taken a combination of other prescription sedatives earlier that night, specifically including the drug lorazepam. Murray ultimately administered a reduced dose of Propofol that morning, 25 milligrams, instead of the 50 milligram dose that had reportedly become his more typical nightly amount over the previous 2 months. And according to Murray's own testimony, Michael Jackson's final documented words, before finally drifting off, were remarkably simple and direct, almost startling in their plainness, given everything else surrounding that moment. Just make me sleep. Doesn't matter what time I get up. Sit with those words for a moment. Stripped of any performance, any image management, any awareness whatsoever that they would ever be repeated publicly in a courtroom and then endlessly online for the next 15 years. Those words capture something that the entire global spectacle surrounding This Is It never once showed audiences watching from the outside. A 50-year-old man so completely depleted by chronic, unrelenting insomnia that he genuinely no longer cared what time he eventually woke up the next day. He simply needed the exhaustion itself to stop, even if only for a handful of hours. Murray testified that he then left the bedroom for what he personally described as only a couple of minutes, specifically to use the bathroom down the hall. When he returned to the room only a short time later, Michael Jackson had already stopped breathing entirely. The Propofol, according to the toxicology evidence and expert testimony presented at trial, had combined dangerously with the other sedatives already circulating in his system, creating what Murray's own defense legal team would later describe in court filings as a perfect storm occurring inside his body, one that ultimately proved fatal within a matter of minutes. It is worth pausing on the sheer ordinariness of those final words. No grand declaration, no final message intended for the world, just a simple, human request for rest, made by someone whose body had been pushed for months past the point where rest could come naturally anymore. Medical experts who later reviewed the circumstances surrounding his death pointed specifically to the danger of mixing propofol with the benzodiazepine sedatives Michael Jackson had already taken earlier that night on his own. Each drug on its own carried real risk when used outside a hospital setting. Combined together, without proper monitoring equipment and without continuous medical supervision in the room, the combination became something the human body could not safely absorb. That detail, more than any single dramatic moment, explains why a routine-seeming request that night ended so differently than it had on so many nights before it. For years immediately after Michael Jackson's death, those final documented words seemed, to many casual observers following the story, like nothing more than a small, almost forgettable detail buried somewhere deep inside a much larger and more dramatic legal case. A footnote mentioned briefly during Conrad Murray's manslaughter trial, noted by reporters covering the proceedings, and then largely set aside in favor of bigger, louder questions about blame, negligence, and legal responsibility for his death. But when you take the time to place those specific words back inside the full, complete picture of what Michael Jackson's final weeks actually looked like behind the scenes, they stop feeling small or forgettable at all. Consider everything happening simultaneously. A man rehearsing for what was, by any measure, the most physically demanding tour of his entire career, at 50 years old, with a body that had already endured 4 decades of professional performing. A man reportedly collapsing on stage during rehearsals and still returning the very next day regardless. A man under serious, mounting financial strain, with people close to him later describing genuine fear that he might lose the home, Neverland Ranch, that had meant absolutely everything to him personally. A man whose body had simply stopped responding to ordinary, conventional sleep medications entirely, no matter what was tried. "Doesn't matter what time I get up" was not some throwaway, casual phrase, spoken without thought. It was the authentic voice of someone who had reached a point where rest itself, in any form available to him, mattered more in that exact moment than anything else happening around him. More than the tour, more than the rehearsal schedule waiting for him later that same day, more than the entire world's enormous expectations patiently waiting for him across the ocean in London. It was the unmistakable sound of total physical and mental depletion, spoken honestly, and without any pretense to the one person in that house he genuinely believed could actually help him in that specific moment. That is exactly why those particular words finally make complete sense once you understand everything that came directly before them. They were never actually a mystery requiring some elaborate decoding. They were never a hidden message waiting 15 years to be properly understood. They were simply the plain, exhausted truth of a man who had been quietly breaking down, piece by piece, behind one of the most anticipated comebacks in the entire history of popular music, and who, in what turned out to be his very last conscious words, was simply and honestly asking for the one basic human thing his body needed most desperately in that final moment. Understanding this does not require believing in any conspiracy. It does not require searching for hidden meaning where none exists. It simply requires being willing to look honestly at the full weight of exhaustion, pressure, and physical breakdown that had been building for months, largely unseen by the public, right up until the moment it could no longer be hidden or pushed through any further. There is also something worth understanding about how isolated that exhaustion truly was. Hundreds of people were involved in preparing the This Is It production. Dancers, choreographers, lighting designers, sound engineers, all working toward the same shared goal of bringing Michael Jackson back to the stage. And yet, in the actual moment he needed help the most, in the middle of the night when sleep simply would not come, the only person in the room with him was one physician, with no nurse present, No hospital monitoring equipment standing by, and no second opinion available to question whether what was being administered that night was truly safe. Michael Jackson did not leave behind some dramatic prophecy on the night before he died. He did not leave behind a hidden warning carefully encoded for the world to decode. Years later, the kind of thing internet conspiracy theories tend to manufacture out of thin air. What he actually left behind was something far simpler, and in many genuine ways, something far harder to sit with honestly. A tired man asking the person closest to him in that room for help falling asleep. The same basic universal human need that nearly every single person watching this video right now has personally felt at some difficult point in their own life. The tragic difference in his specific case is that this need had become so severe, so completely unmanageable through any normal medical means available to him, that it ultimately cost him his life in the most preventable way imaginable. Understanding those final words does not require any conspiracy theory or any hidden secret message buried within them. It simply requires understanding the full, complete weight of what he was actually carrying during those final difficult weeks of his life. The relentless pressure of the upcoming tour, the genuine fear of potentially losing Neverland forever, a body that had quietly stopped letting him rest the natural way it once had for most of his life. Once you take the time to understand all of that context together, 5 simple words, spoken quietly in a dark and otherwise silent bedroom, finally make complete and tragic sense. Michael Jackson asked, simply and honestly, for sleep. He did not get the kind of true restorative rest he was desperately hoping for that night, and the world has spent more than 15 years since trying to fully understand exactly how someone so deeply loved, so constantly watched by millions, so seemingly powerful and untouchable on stage, could have been quietly carrying that much exhaustion and that much hidden suffering, without enough of the people around him fully realizing just how serious it had truly become. Perhaps that is the real lesson hidden inside this story, more than any single dramatic detail about the drug or the dosage or the timeline of that final night. Even the most famous, most visible person on the planet can be suffering quietly in ways the people around them do not fully grasp until it is far too late to help. The message Michael Jackson left behind that night was never meant for the world. It was meant for one person, in one room, asking for one simple thing. It only became a message for the rest of us once we finally took the time to understand everything that came before it. What do you think those final words really reveal about everything he was actually going through behind the scenes during those final weeks? Drop your thoughts and your own perspective in the comments section below. Like this video if it made you think differently about that night. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this one. And turn on notifications, because there is still so much more of this story left worth telling.